Good morning. Good morning. This is the Checkin In podcast, episode 17. Today is July the 26th, 2021, Monday. Happy Monday to all of you. Glad to be back with you on the Checkin In podcast. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Mine was abundance with work, and so I feel very accomplished there. This morning, like usual, I'm on the TikTok live stream, the Instagram live stream, and the YouTube live stream. So for those of you coming in, good morning. How are you all? Nice to have you joining the Checkin In podcast. This morning, we are answering the question, if you continue doing what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years' time? If you continue doing what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years? The Checkin In podcast exists for a couple of reasons. Actually, 3 good, solid reasons, and I want to share those with you because I want you to be a part of this, even in the way that it transfers some benefit to you. The Checkin In podcast for 3 reasons. The first is to grow in self-awareness, to grow in awareness of ourselves. Secondly, to also maximize our happiness. And thirdly, to learn to be kind to ourselves. Those are 3 really important things that I want to continue doing in my own personal life. I want to invite you guys to do the same with me as well. We do this by asking self-reflective questions. And we consider these self-reflective questions. We analyze them. We see, here is how they are really good questions to ask with reference to ourselves. And then I answer those questions after I consider, what are the merits of those questions. I would love to direct your focus to my website, bennymasters.com/happiness, where I've provided a resource for free where I share some of my best ingredients of how I'm able to keep happy in a constant zone. Not always happy, but in that zone of happiness. And so that is my gift that I want to share with you guys if you haven't already checked that out. But today, episode 17 on the Checkin In podcast. So glad to have you guys join in. I love seeing all my friends coming on here. So welcome. I'm glad to have you for the next few minutes. I'm going to do this for the next maybe like half an hour, and then head off to my Monday. I'm off to pick up the kids today. They're going to hang out with me for a few days, which is great. But first, let's dive in together on this one here. Good morning on the Instagram, TikTok, and the YouTube live stream. Glad to have all of you join in. So let's jump into the question. The question again is, if you continue doing what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years' time? This is a question, a self-reflective question about our future. Good question. It sounds like a great question. I'm not exactly sure what my answer will be quite yet, but this is why I do this, so I can actually process through for myself, to grow in self-awareness, to learn to be kind to myself in the midst of reflecting, and then also to maximize my happiness as I forecast and plan where I want to see things evolving and growing towards. So here is my thoughts on this question. I love that this question gets me thinking about, what am I doing right now? Because the question is, if you continue doing what you're doing presently, right now, where are you going to end up? What will be your forecast in 5 years' time? So there's some elements of this question that are beyond our control, and that we don't know exactly how things evolve and change over time. And I want to acknowledge that at the outset, saying, yeah, that's part of the dynamic, that we can plan as best as we can. We can give forecasts, but at the end of the day, there's also limitations to this question here, in that this is the best that we can understand of how things evolve and change for our own context in going forward. So there's an element in which I am expressing helplessness in the midst of trying to answer this question and saying, here's the best insights that I have as I go forward in this realm here. So I'm not trying to become like a, like one of those future fortune tellers. One of the things I've often said in a joking manner is, the one industry, it seems to me, that has missed out big time with reference to the pandemic that we've all just been coming through. The one industry that could have really made a killing and brought a lot of repute to their business are fortune tellers. Can you imagine if a fortune teller was saying, "Guys, listen up. Something significant is coming. This is what's going to happen." And all of us would have been like, "Yeah, we don't think that's going to happen. That seems very far fetched that the world will change in such a short span of time." Imagine the amazing impact fortune tellers could have made if they had seen this pandemic coming and tried to give us a heads up. They could have brought a lot of repute to their industry, to their trade, right? So I'm not trying to be a fortune teller, even as I answer this question, but I'm trying to put together my best forecast of what I see most likely happening as I move forward with reference to this area of what I'm currently doing right now. What is it that I'm doing right now, and where is it going to lead me in 5 years' time? So I like that it's getting me thinking about the future, but thinking more carefully about where I'm currently investing my time. Sometimes I think we might have some ambitions or plans or goals, but we never see them happening because we never actually take steps to doing that. For example, if you want to make $1 million, but you sit on the couch and watch movies all day, it's unlikely that you're going to make any steps in progression towards that end, right? And so this is a question that's asking, hey, what are you doing right now? And where is it going to lead to if you consistently keep on going this track here? So that's one element of this question, is that it's not like a for certain, here's what is going to happen, but here's what is most likely to happen as things progress and evolve over time. And so I think that's a really helpful observation as we consider that progression. Secondly, I like the time frame that it gives. The time frame that it gives is like a mature time frame, right? It's not like what's going to happen in the next day based on what you're doing pattern wise right now. That's not the question, or even the next month, because those are just really short spans of time. And we want to give something enough space and time to be able to see the pattern that develops to a most likely end. And so the time frame here that's being given is 5 years. 5 years is a bit of it's a good chunk of change there, but in that 5 years it gives us that ability to be able to see things developing and evolving by way of patterns, right? And a huge asset there is how much is it going to enable us to be able to get there. Friends, I see the questions coming in. I appreciate them. I can't actually answer those questions right now because this is the time we have for the Ben Checkin In podcast, and I have the question that I have on my featured that I'm featuring on today's episode, and that's, if you continue doing what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years time? Maybe like part of the answer will revolve in your question. When you're asking what's the earning potential for Uber and so on. So I appreciate the questions. I can't answer them quite head on because that takes away from the podcast. But I'll tell you afterwards how I can answer your questions more directly. And so stay tuned for that, if you will. But I'm so glad to have you here. Really thrilled to have you. So, yes, there is a component of not being a fortune teller, but at least being able to forecast and saying patterns lead up to certain ends. And so, what does that look like in a 5 year span going forward here? Second part is I love the time frame. It's a 5 year spell. 5 year spell being important for me because it gives me time to be able to figure out over this period of time, is this a really is this a realistic forecast here of what could be? Hello to all the friends coming in. I see you guys coming in. Good to have you. I'm doing well and glad to have you here on the Ben Checking In podcast. So there's time frame, which is 5 years. So that's a good chunk of change. And I think that's a really good span of time to start planning for things and saying, is this what I want to see evolving, even as you consider what you're presently doing right now? And then thirdly, it is in present tense. Present tense of if you continue doing what you're currently doing right now. So consider what you're doing right now. I'm going to consider what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to say, is this a really good pattern that I want to see evolving over time? If I'm doing currently what I'm committed to right now. So even as you consider what you're doing right now, it gives you the option of saying, okay, this is the forecast here. If I don't like the forecast, I don't have to stay with what I'm doing right now. I can shift along the way. Currently, I'm streaming on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. That's where the platforms are being live streamed on right now. Young. So yes, the point is consider what you're doing right now. Is this pattern or activity or commitment or investment that you're doing right now going to be a good one in 5 years time? Because if it isn't, it doesn't mean you have to keep on doing it because you're locked in. It means you can pivot if you don't like the forecast of what you're doing right now and where it's going to lead you. So if that's the case, this is a fantastic question because it can be the call to an about turn in your own context, in your own life. And that is fantastic. Fantastic insight because part of this podcast, the Bench Checking In podcast, we have three things that we're doing. One is to grow in self awareness of ourselves. What is it that makes us us by asking these kind of questions? Secondly, to maximize our happiness. I'd like to be happy about the choices I'm making right now in 5 years' time. So, this gives me a chance to have access to that happiness. And thirdly, it also facilitates what does it look like to learn to be kind to myself. So even as I consider where I'm going, I may be happy with where I'm at. And I could say to myself, this is good, nice work. Or I could say, I don't like the pattern or trajectory that I'm on, the things I'm doing right now, and it's not making me happy, or nor is it, nor, no, or I'm also having challenges in being kind to myself. So what that could look like is saying something like, you know what? I don't like this pattern, but I'm going to learn to be kind to myself even as I choose a different pathway. Instead of saying, I'm really stupid for having done this, because our minds usually do that kind of self negative talk. Showing kindness can be like, hey, I'm really glad I had this insight. And I'm glad that I have the ability to pivot. And I'm going to make the best choice going forward. And so this is awesome. Gabriel comes in saying, I'm studying accounting, so I hope to enjoy myself in 5 years. Gabriel, can I tell you, I really hope that this is a fantastic venture for you. And I'm saying that because that was my first degree. And at that time, as I looked into my future after I did this degree, I was like, this is not what I want to do with my future. This is not fill me with a sense of purpose or satisfaction or contentment in my career. And so at that time, I pivoted, and I sure hope that that is something that you love doing because we are all so different, Gabriel. And if this is the one that fits that bill for you, my goodness, I'm so happy for you. I'm really listening carefully when I talk to my Uber riders, for example, and as they share with me their dreams and their hopes and their ambitions, I'm listening for that component that would say, hell yes to this, right? And so that's what I hope it is for you, Gabriel, because that's so critical and important, I believe. But those are some of the reflections I was thinking with reference to this question. Those three things again are one, it's amazing that this question enables us to forecast for the future, not in the way of a fortune teller that says this is what's going to happen, but based on the patterns of things and activities that you're currently doing right now, is this going to lead you towards that destination that you're going to feel really thrilled about? Is that the kind of outcome that is going to give you that sense of your purpose being felt? Or you're like, this is really good. So I like that gets us thinking about things coming up in the future, especially with reference to our happiness, with reference to our awareness of ourselves, and with also awareness of how to be kind to ourselves in the meantime. Secondly, I love that it's a 5 year span of time. That's a good chunk of change right there that enables us to say, is this a worthwhile investment? And thirdly, also important, I think it also gives us that ability to say, if you don't like the forecast of what you're presently doing that's going to lead you towards that end, you have the option of pivoting. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful to be able to know that you have options to be able to say, here's where I'm coming in, but I don't like what this looks like. So I'm going to pivot over in this direction. So that's brilliant. So as I've considered those components to this question, which I think is a great question with reference to the future, let me share with you some of my answers. And I'd love to hear you guys' answers. Thank you, Gabriel, for sharing yours. I really appreciate that. So here's where I'm thinking with reference to this question. For me personally, here's what I think. Currently, I'm doing a lot of things that are really amazing and good. I'm thinking in three key areas. One, I'm thinking with reference to how I'm doing in my mental health. That's a really important part. The things that I'm thinking of doing right now, is that going to lead me towards that forecast? Secondly, it is the area of the way I interact with and relate with people. That's an important one for me too. So the way I'm engaging with people right now is also super important. And what kind of boundaries am I implementing? So are the things that I'm doing with reference to the way I connect with people, is that going to lead me in a good zone? And then the third part is how I'm doing physically. These are all fresh reflections that I've had as I've been chatting and interacting with some close friends. And so, yeah, so let me jump in on this. And don't worry, Christian, I don't mind the haters for coming in. They will usually leave their input, but I have a really good gift and ability of ignoring them because honestly, they're wasting their own time. So no worries. I appreciate your love, brother. Haters come along the way and they want to leave their impact of discouragement and, just kind of pulling down. I don't respond to that at all. So I'm all good. My dear K-Man, good to see you, Carl. Thanks for joining in. So here's what my answers to this question are. On the first hand, on the mental health zone, I think I'm doing amazing. I've gone through enough crap in my life. I made a whole bunch of really unfortunate decisions in my life that I've seen a pathway that that's going to lead me to. And I said, hell no. I've lived, especially a lifetime where I've been dishonest. I've been lacking in integrity. And that has adversely affected so many dear people to me. I've hurt them in a really deep way. I've seen the pathway that that leads me on, and now I'm in this zone where I'm like, I don't ever want to experience that again. And so, for me, at that point in time, I made some really difficult decisions that enabled me to go down a pathway that reflects really and resonates well with me in a significant way. And so, I was able to pivot at that time and say, nope, I don't want that. I want to experience something different. And I'm so thankful that I'm in a season of life right now where my mental health is aligned because I feel I can be who I am on the inside in the way I'm presenting myself externally. And so what you're seeing is what you're really getting, but don't take my word for it. See that over time consistently. That's why we were talking about a 5-year span right here for these patterns that are evolving in your life, these things that you're currently doing. And so I feel I have a real strong access to how I see myself, how I think about myself, how I speak to myself, how I interact with myself. I have a really strong sense of how to maintain a really good equilibrium up in my mental space between my ears. And I value that so highly because that for me is a really important component of what it looks like for me to get to my destination. And that's a lifetime filled with amazing memories of how I was able to keep in this zone of positivity, is how some say it. And others would say it in a different way. So others would say, like, how are you always so happy? How are you always so, just in this zone of things are going good. And that for me has been because of the discipline I've implemented to say, here's how I'm going to make sure that this space in my mind is in a good place. And I'm so thankful for this. So that's number one. My mental space, holy crap, I think I'm doing really well because I'm able to apply rigorous investment and saying, what does it look like for me to remain in this really, really good space in my life? Um, I think it was in the last couple of podcasts last week, I covered a question that says, what are your first thoughts in the morning? When you wake up, what are you thinking? And that was really helpful. I've never answered that question before, but it was really helpful for me to go through that question and answer that question. It gave me some real insights into some areas that I could be working on and some areas that I'm doing really well on. And on this area of like my mental health, it's never been better. It's never been better. I'm in that zone where I'm like, oh, I'm right where I need to be, And so I'm so thankful for that. Now, the second component. So I was going to talk about my mental health. I was going to talk secondly about the way I interact with people. I feel that I am now in a season where I'm communicating out of honesty, ruthless honesty that accounts for where people are at. And so I like being able to be intentional in the way I set my expectations with those that I connect with. My close friends know that we just don't coast into a casual friendship, not at all. My close friends know that we enjoy some rich, deep conversations, which are so meaningful. And yet, we also work through some heavy stuff when they're going through rough times. We feel that we can actually connect in tangible ways. I'm somewhat like a go-to for my group of friends with reference to relationships because I've been able to implement some helpful parameters that enable me to keep in a really happy place where expectations are realized because we actually talked about them, right? they know what to expect from the friendship, and then they build trust as a result of that. And so that's a beautiful thing. And so relationship wise, I think this is also fantastic because I've learned how to be able to set boundaries in my relationships and my friendships. I've learned how to be able to implement said boundaries in the relationship, in the relationships that I have. And in this zone, I just feel like there is a consistency there that really reflects in the way the relationships and friendships evolve and grow over time. So for that, I am supremely grateful. It's just so important for me. So yeah, there is that component. And then finally, there's the final component, and that is my physical health. And this one here is where I'm not doing so well. I'm not doing well for the following reasons on this one here. Let me share with you. For the longest time in my life, one of the shortcuts I've taken is on my physical health. And how I've done that is I've pushed my body so far. I've pushed my body in such a sense that I'm able to accomplish amazing feats with the energy levels that I have. I've pushed myself to inhuman capacities, it seems, just because I can. I've pushed my body to accomplish so many things and goals in my life at the expense of my body. And the very key area here that I'm not doing super well on is on the sleep factor. Not that I don't sleep well when I get to sleep. I sleep deeply. I sleep wonderfully. I never have insomnia struggles. I never have trouble just knocking right out. But the point is that I push my body to the point where I have no more energy, and I've done that for so many years. And so I don't have a balance in my life right now with reference to rest. And so one of those areas that I want to see this evolving and shifting and growing for me personally is, what does it look like for me to have that element of balance that gives my body what it needs? I was talking about this with my uh, friends who are collaborating with business ideas on me yesterday. We meet together every couple of weeks. And so they really challenged me. They really said, Binyam, what would it look like for you to prioritize your physical health? Because that's an area that's an imbalance in your life. And I acknowledge that. And so for me, what that looks like, there's some radical things. Here, let me just show you the fulfillment of this question. It says, if you continue what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years' time? With reference to the way I think about myself and my world, my mental health is amazing. I want to keep on doing what I'm currently doing because that has amazing, bright forecasts for me. With reference to the way I establish boundaries and implement boundaries with my friends and my connections and my relationships, that again is stellar. I want to keep on doing that because that has a really good forecast, and I can't wait to see where that's going to lead in 5 years. That's going to be fantastic. So full steam ahead on these first two things. In the realm, however, of my rest and the way I treat my body, it's abysmal. Abysmal because I've not been kind to my body. I've pushed my body. I've worked super hard, harder than I need to. And so this is an area that is desperately in need of shifting and changing. So here's the commitments I made to my friends yesterday. For now on, going forward, I'm going to prioritize my physical health as number one priority. And what that looks like is, first thing that goes in my schedule is not my accomplishments or things that I'm going for by way of goals that I want to see coming to fruition. For me, the first thing on my schedule right now would be carving out the blocks of time that I need to sleep and prioritizing those are like my number one go-to goal right now, and what I feel is really important for me. So I want to really kind of hone in on this one here and saying this is so important, and here's what that looks like for me. So sleep is that thing that I want to prioritize as number one. And here's how I'm thinking: when I prioritize sleep in my personal life, sleep is the engine. It's like me putting gas in my vehicle's tank. If I don't have gas in there, I'm not getting anywhere. In the same way, for me personally, if I don't put gas in my tank, that enables me to accomplish all these ambitious goals that I have. And I've got some ambitious goals in life. Um, if I don't put gas in the tank, and the gas would be sleep, if I don't get enough rest for my body, then I'm very much likely to start going downhill in the way that I treat my body, and I won't be able to fulfill on all these other things. So sleep is basically the very essence of what enables me to accomplish in a successful way all the things that are important in my life. So that's a reflection and realization, an epiphany, if you will, that I came to be aware of just yesterday. Yeah, yesterday morning when I got together with my friends. So that's why this is a timely question for me. But friends, I would love to hear your reflections as you've been listening in. The question again is, If you continue doing what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years? I answered this question in three ways. The first one was mental health, the second one was relational health, and the third one is physical health. And on the latter one, that's where I need to invest a lot more time and energy, because if I don't, it's going to come and bite me in the rear in a really unfortunate way, in a way that I do not want to see happening. So that's super, super important for me. That's why I love this series that we are in on the Bin Checking In podcast. We ask ourselves self-reflective questions that enables us to grow an awareness of who we are, why it's important to us that we're doing whatever we're doing. It gives us that ability to be more intentional as we go forward, right? Intentional in what we're committing ourselves to, and that's why I love about these reflections, is it gives us that commitment and saying this is important for us to figure that out, right? So yeah, that is a really important thing for me. I hear that we have some issues on the recording, but that's okay. We'll figure those out in time. It's just repeating a few strains of the song. But as I wrap up today's podcast and ignore the looping music, I want to ask you, how are you showing kindness to yourself? How are you showing kindness to yourself in the way you're going forward? That's an area that we often struggle with, showing kindness to ourselves, speaking to ourselves in redeeming ways that are helpful. And I think it's a really important component to consider and implement in our lives, is how we're treating ourselves in our mental space. This is an area that I think most people struggle with. And if you're one of those, I want to invite you to join a community that I'm building on my website, biniamastros.com. I want to really push this in here because I would love to have you as part of that community in which we get together intentionally on a regular basis, where we speak into each other's lives, not by way of saying you should do this and this is what your forecast for life should be, but more so by way of understanding, hey, what are you currently experiencing in life right now, and how is that affecting where you're going? Asking good questions as we intentionally be present for one another. Do you know what I'm saying? Asking intentional questions to be able to say, hey, how can we help you get to those goals that you have in your life? What does that look like for us to be able to inspire one another? And so a huge part of that is learning how to be kind to ourselves. It's being able to hold ourselves accountable and saying, hey, how can you learn to speak to yourself in affirming ways, in encouraging ways, in ways that build you up instead of tearing you down? So if that is something that you struggle with, consider joining my membership tier on my website, biniamastros.com. That will give you access to a community where you'll have access also to me, and I'll be able to be more attentive to your thoughts, your questions, your experiences, your ideas, all in real time. I'll be able to answer them as you're interacting with me, and that's where I'll be able to answer a lot of your questions. Most of you love that component about my live streams once upon a time, that I was just being able to follow along comment by comment and interacting with you guys. And I'd love to invite you in a more intentional way into that community. And that's on my website, biniamastros.com. But even as I reflect on that invitation, I also want to encourage you guys too, even as you're learning to be kind to yourselves, how can you also grow in awareness of your body, of your mind, of your trajectory in life? And so that's another really important component for me personally. And I want to invite you to be a part of that process, even in your own context. And finally, that component of maximizing your happiness. I say maximizing your happiness because I also want to give a space for the other emotions and feelings that are just as legitimate in life. Do you know what I'm saying? Those are still important considerations as well. But all this is how we grow together, and how we invest in one another, and how we build one another up as we go forward in this experience called life. So I would just love to, in closing, saying, come and join this fantastic community that I'm building on my website, biniamastros.com. It gives you direct access to me, and my goodness, the forecast, if we continue, guys, listen carefully. If we continue doing what we're doing presently in this podcast, and you guys being a part of it and interacting with me, and even joining my membership tier, if you were to continue doing that for the next 5 years, That's a really bright forecast. Can I just say that? And I'm not tooting my horn here, but I think that's a really amazing forecast. And I'd love to have you join and be a part of that. So consider what that looks like for yourselves, because I would love to have you join in a tangible and intentional way. This is a train that I'm so thrilled that I'm on, and I want you guys to be on with me. So join, visit my website, BennyMasters.com, check out the membership tier, and join today. But today's Monday. It can be a rough day for some people. I hope your Monday is stellar and amazing. I'm so grateful to have you guys join in on the Checkin In podcast. This is episode number 17. Love you guys. Thank you for being here. I will talk to you on tomorrow's episode as we answer the next question. But for now, this is Benny. I'm signing off on the Checkin In podcast. We will see you soon. Bye for now.